Hey there everyone, welcome back to the channel where Doge reads to you for a bit. In today's episode of Dungeons & Dragons Horror Stories, we have a few tales of what happens when a creep invades people's tabletop RPGs. But first, it's time for Lucky to ask something very important. Thanks, Lucky. How can you resist that cuteness? Now, let's get right into these tales. Sketchy Neckbeard turns single-player RP into Catgirl Creepfest by Reddit user jquelln27. A few years back, I put out a call for players on Facebook and got a bunch of replies from people who wanted to play, but had a hard time finding a DM. Perfect, I thought. The player numbers started to wind down while figuring out scheduling, as is expected. But I had one player who really wanted to play the game, but couldn't make scheduling work, so he suggested an asynchronous single-player game. Sounded easy enough. I could reply on my own time, so why not? Now I know why not. So, I'm a young woman, and was in my mid-20s at the time, and this player was a guy that I met at an anime con who seemed friendly enough. I hate to call that alone a red flag, but in hindsight, it kind of was. I tell him the basic premise. It's RP-focused D&D 5e, but with themes of cosmic horror in a homebrew setting. Weird portals are opening up around the starter town, and he has to figure out how to close them before anything too dangerous gets through. Since he was playing by himself instead of with a full party, I told him that I'd be filling the setting with different NPCs that he could recruit for his adventures. His first question? Can I build relationships with the NPCs? I replied that, of course you can. It's an RP heavy game, and your actions and conversations can get NPCs to like and trust you. He responded with, No, I mean romantic relationships. I raised an eyebrow and said that some NPCs could possibly respond to romantic gestures depending on the character and how it's roleplayed. I generally don't have an issue with PC to PC or PC to NPC relationships, after all, but they're not the main focus by any means. He then says, You're okay with adult content, right? I immediately saw where this was heading, and told him that this may not be the kind of RPG he was looking for. This was a magic adventure RPG, not a dating sim. He insisted that he was just asking out of curiosity. He then asked a lot of questions about NPC appearances, including if any were anthropomorphic and how old they were, pretty much alluding to, are they hot catgirls and legal? At least I hope that adult age is the answer he was looking for. I blocked him on Discord and Facebook. I'm glad I shut him down fast, and that he showed his true intentions before we actually started playing. The other group that I'm running the game for, they've been playing for 4 years now, are getting into high levels of play, and uncovering the deeper plot points I set up. We have become good friends, and 2 of them are getting married later this month. I can only imagine how the creep would have derailed this wonderful group with his Catgirl spank bank goals. Well, I would say that OP definitely dodged a bullet in this aspect. It seemed like Neckbeard was only after one thing, and I'm sure you can guess what that is. I could see that eventually becoming that player starting to think that the RP was real, and then get an obsession with OP because of it. It's good that OP blocked him right off the bat. Let's get into the next one. Lesbian newbie to D&D ends up with a creepy male DM. Submitted to the d&Ddoge subreddit by Reddit user Distracted Klutz. Here's my story about how I ended up with a creepy-ish DM while playing D&D. Note, I'm 29, a lesbian, and black. It'll be irrelevant later. This took place a little over a year ago. I had joined a public D&D 5e group through Meetup and had a great time my first session. When I went there a second time, I joined a table being DM'd by this guy. Let's call him Jim. He was okay as a DM, and I had a fun time playing the game. After 1 or 2 sessions with him, he asked the people at the table about starting a private game, and we mostly all said yes, since that was one of the major reasons for the public meetup. In the public meetups, I had a lesbian half-elf rogue, and at one of Jim's public games, my character flirted with a male character just to keep him occupied and unaware of the fuckery me and my teammates had unleashed on the boat we were on. The DM did warn me when I cast the charm on the male snake humanoid character who was the captain of the ship. Since the captain was already into me, I had cast charm on him to distract him from the corpse he was smelling through the window. I tried to get my character out of the room with the captain and resorted to trying to make him slip on magic ice, to even throwing up to throw off his interest. The captain shrugged off the ice and barely slipped, and then he ate all of the vomit in front of my character. Thankfully, the session ended soon after that. It felt weird, but it was all in good fun since I had a chance to use my brain to get out of tricky situations. Now, my DM had this policy where he had an X on a sheet of paper that the players could touch whenever something got too triggering for them, so that they could drop the subject. It was never used, but after what I'm about to tell you, I wish I had fucking used it. I created a female Wood Elf Ranger for the private game, and me and another player decided to have our characters be brother, artificer, and sister, with my character being older. In the first session, a dwarf hires the party to escort something to a mine. The dwarf, played by the DM, seems interested in my character, and my character uses that crush to get a magical bow. The bow is possessive and clingy, and I never end up using it, but that's besides the point. During the first session, I was deciding whether or not to tell the DM and the players that my character was asexual and aromantic, meaning she didn't experience sexual or romantic attraction. I kind of alluded to it in the first session, and then I told everyone in the second session. As the sessions continue, the party ends up at a Firbolg community, and my ranger wants some new arrows. In order to get these fancy new arrows, I have to join the family that makes them, aka a relationship of sorts. I really don't want my character to do that, but the different types of arrows being offered were too good to pass off. So, essentially, my character has to participate in some orgy mating ritual at a celebration. The PC, who is the brother of my ranger, is perfectly fine with the orgy and jumps in. The DM makes him roll for damage or something like that. Orgy damage? What is happening? Then the DM turns to me and offers to fade to black or go into detail. I chose fade to black because I don't feel comfortable role-playing sex with a male DM. I'm a lesbian and 29 years old, so I've dealt with unwanted male attention since I was 12 or 13. It's hard for me to even look strange men in the eye and smile, because I know that even a courtesy glance or smile is all it takes for them to think they have the right to pursue me. Anyway, the DM seems kind of disappointed that I don't want to roleplay, but we move on, and I get my fancy arrows. My character's mother also shows up to the orgy and participates as she's doing some political stuff with the Firbolgs. Well, this sure is an odd family. The party have to return to the mine where the dwarf is, and we've all been magically tied to the Firbolg community, but we have to go through some anti-magic bubble. My character thinks she might die if she does. She gets knocked out by a guard or something, and later on, the dwarf wakes her up and tries to seduce her. Seeing as how she is still bound like a prisoner and isn't actually interested in the dwarf, she makes excuses and pretty much says that she doesn't want to. Then, the dwarf takes her to the prison holding cells, where her mother is battered and bruised up, and then the dwarf takes my ranger back to his bedroom and tries to get her to sleep with him. My ranger is angry that her mom is imprisoned, and that the dwarf tried to threaten her mom with more harm if she didn't sleep with him. She tries to attack him several times, but my attack rolls were horrible. One of the guys in my group is like, "Hey, can we move on from this? There's some other stuff we want to get to." And the DM holds up a hand and says, "Hold on, I like role-playing. I want to continue." So, yeah. My character is trying really hard to get out of sleeping with the dwarf, and I think the DM notices my discomfort and lets up. The dwarf brings in my PC's mom and another woman. The mom sits with my character on the sidelines, while the dwarf has sex with the other woman. My character's mom, played by the DM, chastises my character for not having sex with the dwarf. Next session, the party leaves the mine and gets on a boat with a female red tiefling. As my character leaves, the dwarf puts his arm around my PC's mom and says that she'll be keeping him company since my PC will be gone. Yeah, it was kind of gross, but there wasn't much my character could do. Though, this is when you as a player should have said that this whole thing was creepy and weird, and that if stuff like this continues, that you would leave the game. So, the new NPC, the tiefling captain of the ship, hooks up with one of the party members and gets pregnant because that PC is trying to impregnate as many women as possible. My ranger makes friends with the captain, and let me emphasize that I said friend. The captain even tries to teach me how to fire a cannon, but I almost set the ship on fire. At one point, she refers to me as darling, and I'm like side-eyeing the DM. During that session, the DM tries to make it seem like a relationship is forming, and I'm like, no, they're just friends. I end up missing the next session because I had other plans, and when I show up to the session after that, one of the players tells me that my character was sleeping in the captain's quarters or something like that. Pretty much that my character was hooking up with the captain. And I say in front of everyone, including the DM, so he can retcon it. No, they're just friends. My character is not interested in sexual or romantic relationships. Are you starting to see the pattern here? Just you wait, it gets worse. The party gets to their next destination, and I forget what it is, but we have to go into some abandoned mine to solve a mystery. Once we go in, a squirrel sets off a trap that blocks the mine entrance, so we're stuck. We're pissed with the squirrel, so we try to harm it, but our attacks don't succeed. The DM thought this was funny, even though it wasn't. Well, I mean, I can see that situation being a little funny. It does have some comedic value when I picture it in my mind, but that's just me. The squirrel says something mean and is trolling all of us, and then says he wouldn't mind being held by my character. Oh, there it is. One of the male players in the group has complained several times in these sessions that all the NPCs want my PC, even though my character is Ace and Arrow. This time was no exception. I tried to punch the squirrel, but failed, so the DM has the squirrel crawl into my clothes and sniff my PC's panties. And so it got worse. Of course it did. My PC takes her clothes off to get rid of the squirrel, and the squirrel runs away with her underwear. The DM did warn me that it could possibly be triggering, but I let him roll with it because it was tame compared to the attempted coercive rape from the dwarf NPC. My PC puts her clothes back on, and the squirrel is gone. The party moves deeper into the mines and meets a female dwarf. Once again, this NPC is interested in my character, and my character only, and wants to have sex with my character. Imagine my shock! She's not interested in the PC that wants to impregnate women, so I tell her that she has to join if she wants to sleep with me, so she agrees. The next day, she tries to start up a romance with my PC, and my PC says, "What was your name again?" The rest of the group finds this hilarious, and thankfully, the session ends soon after. Oh, and randomly, not long before the session ends, the DM tells us that the squirrel snuck back into my PC's clothes and has been hiding there. Yeah, it makes no sense, but like I said, the session ended soon after that. After that session, I started to put some pieces together. There was a pattern forming. Yeah, you think? And it had gotten to the point where I was uncomfortable but too scared to say anything. I talked to some friends about it, and they all said that I was being targeted by the DM and that I needed to tell him to stop. I also suspected that the DM might have had a crush on me, and I felt like I should have said something about me being a lesbian before these private games even started. It was a welcoming community, so it wouldn't be odd. I just never felt the need to bring it up. And nor should you have to. Your sexuality is your business. And even if you weren't, what that DM was doing is not okay, and really creepy. The DM, Jim, did little things that made me think he might be into me. All the NPC stuff was one clue. Another was that when I went to the other DM's tables at the public meetups, he would send someone from our private game to offer an invite to his table. I declined, of course, and wanted to be around a DM that wasn't creepy. I also got a haircut once, and he was the only person who mentioned it and said it looked nice. Anyway, I finally built up the courage and texted the DM to stop making the NPCs flirt with my character because it was making me uncomfortable. He agreed and said that he'd make adjustments. I'm not going to speculate on how many more times he planned to have NPCs to flirt with my PC. I started having some minor health issues soon afterwards, so I stopped going to the private and public sessions. A few months later, I showed up to the meetup spot for DM training, but in my distracted mind, I had arrived 2 weeks earlier. My brain had been frazzled since my mom had been diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer just a week or so earlier. There was a beginning session call for Call Cthulhu, run by one of the women in the meetup, and she invited me to join because I looked so distressed and worn down when I arrived. I ended up loving that game, and the female GM. She never ventured into creepy territory, and even told one of the other female players that even though it was set in the 1920s, that she didn't have to use the term colored for black people. The other female player was not black. I think she was Filipino. And her using that term made me uncomfortable since I am black. I didn't even have to say anything, and the GM was like, we don't have to use that term just because it was common during that time. One day, Jim decides to join the game as a priest, and his character ended up getting killed at the end of the story we were doing. I barely paid attention to him, and focused more on the people and the GM that I had bonded with over the months of playing the game. Now, with the COVID-19 pandemic, the meetups have moved their campaigns to Roll20. I haven't joined a session since I'm pretty busy with current life stuff, but yeah, that's my story. TLDR, I, a lesbian newbie to D&D, ends up with a creepy DM trying to force my asexual and aromantic PC into relationships with NPCs, and due to life events, I eventually stop going to games and find another game to play with an awesome GM. Well, there is a bit to unpack here from this story. What that DM was doing was targeting OP with the intent of flirting, and in creepy ways too. I'm of the mind that if you like someone at a table that you're playing at, it's usually just best to talk to them in person out of game. If the DM did that in this case, he would have been disappointed, but then all this flirting in-game could have been avoided. If you can call what he was doing flirting. Though, there is the thing with the red X that the players could have put their hand on to let the DM know that what was going on is making someone feel uncomfortable, which is a pretty decent idea. Now, this isn't excusing what the DM was doing, because it certainly was creepy, but OP could have used that to let him know to stop. Thankfully, it sounds like OP had found another table to play at, and hopefully has since started playing again since the original post that was cross-posted to the d&Ddoge subreddit is 2 years old, back when we were all knee-deep in lockdowns. But that's all this Doge has to say on this one. Let's get into the next story. Incel doesn't care that I'm married. He deserves pictures of me. By Reddit user Chaos Gamer Girl. Thankfully, this story isn't as bad as it could have been, and it's a good lesson for me in setting my firm boundaries. I'm a very experienced Pathfinder player, as I've been playing since it was released. One of my in-real-life friends is DMing a Roll20 game, and I play in it. I am very willing to help new players and make myself available to them to help with character creation. We had one player join, Creep, who needed a lot of help. At first, it was fine, and I was willing to spend a few hours before the game going over things and teaching him how to use Roll20. Except he never learned. Every single time we leveled, I had to help him. He started getting creepy towards me, and started getting very upset anytime I cursed, but not when a man cursed. Every time he'd make a comment about how a lady like you should not use such language. He asked me for pictures, and then even got pouty when I told him no. He flirted with me in a sexually aggressive manner, both in and out of character. I'm married, and I am pretty open about that fact. It's not a big thing. I just can only play after a certain time because I need to get dinner ready. Creep would get jealous when I'd mention doing something for or with my husband, and he'd get pouty if I said I couldn't respond in chat because I was with him. He messaged me constantly and expected me to always answer. I tried to explain that I have work and school and a life, but he'd still get really upset if I didn't answer within a half hour. He finally got called out by multiple people about his creepy and sexually aggressive flirting. He played the victim and said it's my fault for overreacting to compliments. He left the group because he couldn't find any support, and everyone was calling him out. He then threatened to kill himself to the one person still talking to him. He genuinely believes that he has the right to say anything he wants to me, and that I don't have the right to limit contact or refuse contact completely. He thinks that I'm overreacting and making a big deal out of nothing. Update: he's on the sex offender registry and currently on parole, having just been released from prison a few years ago. Well, that update certainly makes sense given the context of the story. Honestly, the creep should have been kicked out after the first time he did those things. And as one of the commenters on the post stated, his complaints about her cussing was a manipulation tactic to see if he would be able to control her in a small way, and testing her boundaries. And then him sulking when she mentioned her husband was the same sort of tactic. Good thing that she and the others basically told him to fuck off, and hopefully, any woman he comes into contact with will do the same. Now, I think we need a dose of kitties after those stories. Have you ever had a creep at the table that just ruined the game for everyone? If so, and would like your story shared on the channel, feel free to post it in the comments, on the d&Ddoge subreddit, or even just at me on Twitter. As always, I appreciate all of you, and hope a player like the ones in these stories don't come creeping into your games. Until next time.